We're so glad you're tuned in again to the Catholic View for Women, where we give you news and views from a truly Catholic perspective. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with my lovely and stellar co-hosts, Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana. And each season, at the end of each season, we do a show dedicated to you. And it's all about your questions. And we call it, at the end of each season, Inquiring Minds Want to Know, because you ask, quite frequently, such great questions. And ladies, we have a lot of questions to get to, so let's go right to it.
Yeah, well, just so the viewers know that we take the top 3 questions that have come in during the course of the season. So these are the 3 winners. It doesn't mean that all the questions aren't important. But
and there's no prize involved, so it's just you're not losing out on anything. Yeah. So keep writing.
Keep writing, exactly. Our first question comes from Diane from Los Angeles, and she writes, "My brother just told me he is gay and he feels the church is against him. How should I respond?"
My first statement would be, the church says, love the sinner, hate the sin. And that is church teaching. We love, because all of us have an area of difficulty, all of us are sinners. We use the graces in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church welcomes all of us. And there is nobody that hasn't sinned except for our most blessed mother, of course. But so it is a myth that the church will persecute you because you have this or that inclination. But be aware that homosexuality is a sin.
Well, and also, too, we've done numerous shows. If they look on our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com, we have covered this topic extensively in prior shows, and we had some great interviews also about men who are gay, but they leave a celibate life. And the great ministry for that is Courage, which was founded by Father Harvey. And I'm actually from New York, so I have to take a little credit there. And
CourageRC.net is a great website.
And then there's Encourage for parents.
For the parents.
For family members. Right.
Exactly. And so, you know, I think the best thing is, first of all, when you get that news from your brother, love him. He's still your brother. You know, and I can speak to this personally because my brother was gay. And very sad, though, my brother, this was only back in the 90s, he developed AIDS. And it was very sad. We nursed him to his death. And 2 days before he died, he turns to me and says, "All right, you're the Catholic girl. You're still practicing your faith. Get me a priest." And I did.
Wow.
And I got my parish priest at the time. Wasn't Father Pavone. He was already over in Rome working for the Pontifical Council for Family. But I got my parish priest. I called him. He says, "Pick me up, Janet. We're on our way." And this priest spent over an hour in the bedroom with my brother. And he came out and he said, "Your brother will die with the Lord tonight."
Aww.
And of course he died 2 days later. And so, you know, what I say is always, you have to love them. Don't, you know, some people, their reaction is they want to like shun them or, you know, but no, you have to reach out, and they're still your brother or your sister or, you know, whatever, you know, it could be a parent, it could, who knows now what it is. But you speak in love, the truth in love. So you do tell them about the church's teaching. And then, of course, Elena, we have some good quotes here.
Let me make one point before that. I really think when they say, "My brother just told me he's gay and feels the church is against him," why does he feel that way? What is it that I would enter into a loving conversation. Well, why do you feel that the church is against him? What is it? Because the church teaches that we all have to be chaste. Just ask some questions lovingly. Well, tell me what it is, because he's probably heard something from someone, "Oh, the church hates gays," or whatever. But ask them where they're coming from, first of all, because that's going to, maybe this is a reporter in me, but that's going to make you, enable you better to respond to their needs.
And you can dispel all these myths that they hear there. I call it the street gossip that's out there. The Catholic Church hates gays. You know, we're all homophobes, and so you can dispel that myth. But Elena, you have, I think, a good quote there from the Catholic Catechism, right?
And that is the paragraph number 2357. Homosexuality refers to relations between men or between women who experience an exclusive or predominantly sexual attraction toward persons of the same sex. It has taken a great variety of forms through the centuries and in different cultures. Its psychological genesis remains largely unexplained, basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity. Tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. They are contrary to the natural law. They close the sexual act to the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine, affective, or sexual complementarity. Under no circumstances can they be approved. And that again is paragraph 2357 of the Catechism.
You know, and this brings me back, Teresa and Elena, to the show we did a couple of seasons ago, and it was Dan Matson, who's very involved with the Courage Ministry. And I remember one of the points we asked him was that, gee, you know, if you say my brother comes with his gay partner, you know, over for, say, Thanksgiving weekend, what do I say if they want to sleep over the house, you know? And I remember Dan saying, you would give the same response if your cousin or your sisters are going to bring their the boyfriend, fiance, and they want to sleep over the house too. That, you know, this is not accepted in our home. In other words, what applies for one should apply to the other too. And you treat it the same way. Well, we don't approve of unmarried persons sleeping in the same bed together in our home. And he said, just treat it the same way.
Now you've got the whole other added issue, though, where you have legalized so-called same-sex marriage.
I know.
And they can say, well, we're married. But then that's when it gets even more tricky and harder for family members.
Right.
Because you have to say, well, you know what? I understand that you think you're married, but in the eyes of the church, it's not marriage. So,
That's right.
You know, we love you, but we're just not
right.
condoning that relationship.
Well, it's that the church, you know, only recognizes church weddings, not civil ceremonies. I mean, that, you know, so therefore, gay marriage, you're not going to get a gay marriage in a Catholic church. Therefore, it's only a civil union. Therefore, it is not recognized by the church. You know.
And the other point in this is as well, how do you explain it to the younger members of the family,
Right.
the teenagers who are starting to observe and want answers, and they're very curious about this, and you should come forward with the truth and explain and share the catechism with them as well, because then they can grow up in the faith and they also have the direct truth, not something, again, not street gossip or this is what the Catholic Church teaches.
Right.
And
going along with what they teach, I'm going to read another quote here, again from the Catechism. This is paragraph 2358. The number of men and women who have deep-seated homosexual tendency is not negligible. This inclination, which is objectively disordered, constitutes for most of them a trial. They must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. Every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided. These persons are called to fulfill God's will in their lives, and if they are Christians, to unite to the sacrifice of the Lord's cross, the difficulties that they may encounter from their condition. Continues now in paragraph 2359. Homosexual persons are called to chastity by the virtues of self-mastery that teaches them inner freedom, at times by the support of disinterested friendship, by prayer and sacramental grace. They can and should gradually and resolutely approach Christian perfection. And that's basically what, you know, Dan told us. And that's really what the Courage Ministry fosters, is to help them live a chaste life.
I think it's important too to have that conversation, to start out with a conversation. Sometimes we're so concerned about the person, and we're also so concerned about the church Christ being offended, that we jump right away to the theology of it.
Yeah.
And what we have to do is meet the person where they're at a level that they can understand, and then walk them, accompany them to the understanding. We don't encourage them to stay in that sin, because that's not right either. But approaching them, I've learned over the years to just kind of reach out to them and say, okay, well, why are you saying this? What is it about the church that you don't understand? And what questions can I answer specifically? That's where it's really important to know your faith. Yeah. Really important to know your faith.
You should also be aware that someone might be upset with you because you represent the faith, and they are really, what they're really expressing is some kind of anxiety because of a deeper reason. And come across as very aggressive to you. Don't take it personally. As you said, welcome them with love, and even invite them to take advantage of the graces of the sacrament of confession.
That's right, that's right. And you know, for me too, you know, I had to deal with also telling my daughters, you know, when my brother came out of the closet, so to speak, and said, I'm gay, and you know, he had someone he was going to start living with. They were teenagers at the time, so we had to have that conversation. We had to sit down and talk about it, and I calmly explained the church's teaching, but this is your uncle, and you love him still, and I still love him. And, you know, you have to have those conversations as a family.
There must be so much more of that going on now, because the culture has really shifted, pressured and shifted and pressured people to thinking that at the slightest thought or twinge that they're automatically this, that, or the other thing. It's really quite scary, the indoctrination that's going on.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. I mean, back you know, when I had to deal with it, it was probably easier than today, because today, right away, there's all this name calling. You know, you can't say anything. You can't even say anything against gay marriage in this day and age without being called out as, you
But
know.
the indoctrination is starting so young. They have,
That's
I don't know
right.
if you've heard about this, that these performances, that there's this whole movement of drag queens, of men dressed up as women, you know, very outlandishly. And they are going around to preschool students. And it started in Brooklyn, and they're going around to preschool students at public libraries. And they're talking about, do you want to be a drag queen when you grow up? So the indoctrination is starting at a very, very young age, forcing parents to probably address this even earlier than they would normally do something like this.
Kindergartens and daycare centers having dress, you know, tomorrow we're all going to come dressed as a girl, tomorrow we're all going to come dressed as a boy. And
well, and I saw evidence of this back when I was a public school teacher in New York, and I'm talking now, this is in the late 80s, early 90s. They tried to introduce a program into the schools.
Oh, I remember you telling me this. Yeah.
Children of the Rainbow, it was called. Children of the Rainbow. And the books inside this curriculum were Heather Has Two Mommies and all this stuff. And again, I had to take a stand with my principal, and I basically walked in with the manual and said, I refuse to teach this. And I threw it on his desk. Basically, I took a stand. And actually, I showed it to Father Pavone. He preached about it in parishes. We had a whole town council meeting. We actually succeeded in getting the curriculum thrown out back then.
How long ago was that?
That was like 1990, 91.
And so that was what, 30 years ago at least?
Right.
No,
But
40 years ago.
Yeah, so before they started with this new drag queen thing in the libraries that are going around, way back,
30 years ago.
30 years ago, they started this wanting to indoctrinate at first grade. I was teaching first grade.
You'd be tarred and feathered and run out of town now with everything that's going on. I mean, it's that bad.
Right.
It's that bad.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of what's happening, and some of these questions are coming up because people have been so inundated with this, and they're convinced of one thing or another, and they're convinced that the church is bad and everybody else is fine. So.
All right, second question comes from Susan, and she lives in Denver, Colorado, and she writes, I have several friends who are practicing Catholics and also are taking birth control pill. What can I say to them about the harmful effects of the pill and the church's teaching?
Well, I mean, where do we start? How much time do we have?
How much time?
In my book, Extreme Makeover, I have a whole chapter called The Contraception Deception.
Right.
And Janet's written about it extensively in Recall Abortion. And we talk about this all the time on my radio show. And there's so much misinformation out there. And even the way the pill, and you talked about this when you were down lecturing in Puerto Rico a few years ago, what happened to the women when they were testing the pill originally.
Yeah, they actually made the women of Puerto Rico back in the late 50s, early 60s, all through that decade, guinea pigs basically, and they were testing the pill on them. And I found out this when I think it was about 2006, because I was speaking all over the island, and the actual people who had lost relatives, aunties and grandmas, were talking to me about it and said, yeah, they came and experimented on us, and we lost relatives who stroked out and everything else from the pill. And that was because when it was first created, it had an extremely high dose of those hormones contained in the pill. Well, Pincus and these other guys who did this research, they kind of covered up those results, and they made it sound like to the FDA everything was wonderful and fine, and that's what allowed the pill to get swift approval. And to this day, the pill is very harmful, and I could just give you this example out of my book, which is astonishing. This is Recall Abortion. This is in the chapter, A Hard Pill to Swallow. And I'm talking here about the pill Yaz and Yasmin, which is the popular pill that's out today. All right, and then it's actually manufactured by Bayer Pharmaceutical, all right? And then as of July of 2012, more than 12,000 personal injury cases have been filed against the Bayer Pharmaceutical for its failure to make consumers aware of the health risk of oral contraceptives, Yaz and Yasmin. The company has paid out, as of then, $402.6 million to settle 1,877 of the suits in the U.S. plaintiffs suffered, and here's what they suffered, the plaintiffs: pulmonary embolism, heart attack, renal failure, pancreatitis, strokes, and even death. And you might say the Yaz and Yasmin contain a very high dose of a synthetic progesterone that has been linked greatly to the risk of blood clots. A lot of these problems are from that. So you might say to me, well, Janet, why are they willing to pay out $4.26 million? Very simple. Annually, they make $1 billion from Yaz and Yasmin. So follow the money. That's it.
Have there ever been any recalls on the contraception pill?
No. And if anything, Just to think, how come it's both abortion and the pill gets
It's women. But it's also women. How come they
women.
don't have something like that for men?
Right.
A pill, birth control.
Yeah, but
there was testing though on men.
Right.
And they found that it was very harmful to men, so they stopped testing on men and they would continue with the women.
But it's very harmful to women, so why is...
But you hear the money they're making. If you're making $1 billion,
because it's a sexist world still. I mean, they call us the sexist and backward ones, and they're using women for
they're making $1 billion, so they're paying out $400 million.
This
but
is
they're
the
making
war
$1
on
billion.
women.
So they're still making $600.
This is the real war on women.
This is the real war on
the real
women.
war on women.
This is it.
Right.
Which leads us back to the church's teachings, which were to protect women. In Humanae Vitae, St. Paul VI was so spot on. And if I would just give this as a resource, if you'd like to read the encyclical, and we have Priests for Life, we've developed a study guide for it. Just go to prolifeproducts.org. And you can order the study guide, because the truth is right there.
Also, there's connections between the pill and certain types of cancer and heart
Right.
disease. There were new studies that came out a few years ago,
Right.
and they were secular studies, and they were about heart disease and also breast cancer, a definite connection. And there's a wonderful website, abortionbreastcancer.com. A woman out of Chicago runs it, and she has all kinds of information between the connection of abortion and breast cancer, but also the pill and breast cancer.
And then finally,
back in 2008, I think it was the World Health Organization.
Yes, we're just going to say that.
I was just going to say that.
Type 1
Group 1
carcinogen, which is the same level as smoking for lung cancer.
Yeah.
Group 1 carcinogen,
And that's for
the
the
birth
World
control
Health
pill.
Organization, which is a branch of the United Nations. It's not a branch of the Catholic Church saying it's a group 1 carcinogen. So it just showed you God's way is the right way, having concern for our health. And if you haven't read Humanae Vitae, I would say it's a must. So to go back to Susan's question, Susan, we've given you the practical, physical reasons why it's bad, but also the church's teaching. And hopefully you can convince some of your friends it's in the women's best interest to go off the pill and practice NFP, natural family planning.
And what about Dr. Angela LaFranchi? I mean, she's got tons of information on this.
information.
Yeah, she's one of the experts, and she's actually been threatened and everything else because of putting all her information out there. There's so much to say about these topics, and that's why when we get to our homework section, after we come back, after our break, we're not going to leave you with just what we're saying here, because this is something we deal with all the time. We're going to give you all kinds of great resources. We will be right back. This show is all about you, your inquiring minds, and your very good questions. More of them when we come back on The Catholic View for Women. Thanks for watching The Catholic View for Women, where we give you news and views from a completely Catholic perspective. And each part of the year when we wrap up our season, whether it's spring or fall, at the end of the season, we do a show all about you. In other words, your questions that come into us practically daily, and Janet keeps very good tally of them, and we pick them based on the most popular topics that come up, the issues. And it's amazing how similar issues keep coming up over and over again. So we're on question number 3 right now, right?
This comes from Kelly from St. Louis, Missouri, and she writes, my cousin and her husband are practicing Catholics, and they have been unable to have children. They are considering in vitro fertilization. What information can I give them about the Church's position on this? And also, are there any risks for the woman?
Lots of risks. But you wanted to mention, you have something in your book, Recall Abortion, about this, right?
Well, yes. And another chapter here, I called it Children Made to Order. And she wants to know about the health risks to women. It's that in order to do IVF, the women have to be ingested with high dose of the hormones. This is to get them to what's called superovulate, so that they can collect and harvest the eggs. So again, this goes back to like the birth control pill and all the other things we've already said in this episode, how harmful that is to your health.
Because you're forcing the body to do something that it normally wouldn't do.
Manipulation of the woman.
It's manipulation. And then, in fact, because of this drugs they have to give them to superovulate, that links to all those other complications I said, like in Yasmin with blood clots, strokes, heart attacks, and deaths even. And so therefore, you're putting also cancer-causing drugs, like you said, with the World Health Organization, just to do this egg harvesting or collection. So that's, harmful.
And also in terms of what the Church teaches regarding this, there were so many news stories in the past year about problems at these various fertility clinics and places where they were storing the embryos after they had gone through the in vitro. The big story was in Cleveland, where there were literally something like thousands upon thousands of embryos that were lost because the tanks malfunctioned.
Right.
And it was so, I thought, very prophetic when you heard the press conference, because they were talking about people. They actually referred to them as babies and human beings and lives lost. And this is why the church teaches what she teaches, because when you start messing around, basically a parent, if they find out, for example, if the drugs are successful or the procedure in vitro in this case is successful, normally they're going to end up with multiple eggs, multiple embryos, right?
That leads to another problem,
right?
Again, which I addressed in Recall Abortion, called selective reduction.
Right.
So let's say, you know, 3 or 4 embryos take. Well, about 16 weeks in gestation, the doctors will recommend selective reduction to the couple. And at this point, you say, well, how do they pick? Several things. They check, of course, the sex of all the babies, and they check for any fetal abnormalities. They present that to the couple, and then they also look at the positioning of the babies in the uterus, because they have to see, well, which ones could we destroy? Which babies can we kill? So now it's a chance if the parents want girls or boys or a combination, or they only want one. And there's a case I wrote about in the book, was tragic. It was in the New York Times about a couple, and the father wrote in about his extreme grief because they did in vitro. She was only conceived twins, and yet they were recommending selective reduction. And she said, well, either we abort the entire pregnancy of them both, or we just get rid of one, but because I did not sign on to have 2 babies, I only wanted 1. And this husband said, this is tragic for me, because I have to either save none or save 1. And so he did cave in and did go through with the reduction. How sad. So there's all kinds, and of course the church's teaching is absolutely spot on on this. And Elena, I think you have something from Donum Vitae to point out. Donum Vitae
says human embryos obtained in vitro are human beings and subjects with rights. Their dignity and right to life must be respected from the first moment of their existence. It is immoral to produce human embryos destined to be exploited as disposable biological material. In the usual practice of in vitro fertilization, not all of the embryos are transferred to the woman's body. Some are destroyed. Just as the church condemns induced abortion, so she also forbids acts against the life of these human beings. It is a duty to condemn the particular gravity of the voluntary destruction of human embryos obtained in vitro for the sole purpose of research, either by means of artificial insemination or by means of twin fission. By acting in this way, the researcher usurps the place of God, and even though he may be unaware of this, he sets himself up as the master of the destiny of others, inasmuch as he arbitrarily chooses whom he will allow to live and whom he will send to death and kill defenseless human beings.
This is so going right back to the Garden of Eden, where we think we can be God, playing God. I mean, think about that they're going to choose which babies are going to live and which babies are going to die. And again, going back to that story that broke out of Cleveland last year, where so many thousands of embryos were lost, it really basically was just showing how real life does reflect the importance of church teaching and why the church teaches what she teaches. Those were lives that were lost, where all of these babies were brought through this in vitro fertilization, and thousands of them died.
And now, time for homework, because we have a lot of resources to give everybody. First, of course, having to do with our first question, visit the website of Courage and Encourage Ministry at couragerc.net. Number 2, read Humana Vitae and go to prolifeproducts.org to order the study guide and the encyclical. Number 3, visit the website of the Pope Paul VI Institute, founded by Dr. Thomas Hilges, which is popepaul6.com. And that will be information there on natural family planning, naprotechnology, and all the things to do it God's way. Number 4, read Bishop Conley's letter, The Language of Love, and we'll have the link there where you can find that. Number 5, Dr. Hilges wrote a wonderful book for actually lay people called The Naprotechnology Revolution. This is not meant for doctors. He has a more advanced one for doctors, but this is meant for lay people. And then number 6, read my book, Recall Abortion, Chapter 10, Hard Pill to Follow. Also, the same one, Chapter 4, Children Made to Order. and that's available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. And of course, Teresa, your book, Extreme Makeover,
right.
also available at EWTN Religious Catalog. And then finally, go to our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com, for more information. All these resources will be up there. And finally, like us on Facebook.
Great show, ladies. And thanks to your great questions. Keep them coming. And as Janet said, you can find us online in between shows at thecatholicviewforwomen.com. We thoroughly enjoyed being with you on The Catholic View for Women. Again, our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com. On behalf of Janet Morana and Elena Rodriguez, I'm Teresa Tomeo. We'll see you next time on The Catholic View for Women. Thanks for watching.